talking about solving equations. You've done lots of them by now. I think this is literally just a bit of a recap, just putting down some official notes for you. Don't come back and start chatting. Alright. So we've been talking about making sure we can read our algebra properly, do it as a language, understand what's actually being done, what's happening, and so that we can undo things. So we want to carry on in that way. Now I've turned you to page 154 just because that's pretty much a start. Well, actually, we could go all the way back. If you turn back to page 150, actually. All right. 151, we've got linear equations, and if you skip through all those pages, you can see all the kind of algebraic equations that we should now know how to do. And you have been working on them, you've been doing on that computer, the website, and you've been talking it through, and you've been doing pretty well. So let's just go through a couple, make some clear notes, and then we can carry on. And then I've got that homework. Did you all see the homework on ManageBack? So I printed it off, so you don't need to worry about printing it off unless you've already started it and printed it off and already done, but I've got it for you here. But let's just go through and go through some examples, and you can write them down. So let's have a look. It says we've got something like, are you going to draw? 3x plus 8 equals 14. Now, first of all, if I said to you, read that to me, what would it say? 3 lots of x plus 8 is equivalent to 14. So we're using better language, not just better as in because it's what I want to see, but better as in it helps you understand. So it means I start with x. Now, there is this method called a flowchart method. So we put down in a diagram what's actually happening. So we can say that we start with x, and the first thing we do to it is multiply it by 3. So I now have 3 x's. Yeah? Whatever x is, if I multiply it by 3. The next thing that I do is add 8. Okay? And I get the answer 14. Now, if I think about it like that, like I've been trying to say to you, it makes sense that if I have an x and I multiply it by 3, I get an intermediary answer. Okay? That makes sense? There is an answer there. Then I add 8. If I told you what x was, you wouldn't just times 3 add 8 in one go. You would have to work out what time multiplied by 3 was first. So when we do our inverse operations, you know we've been talking about that, I've said to you, well, you've got to get rid of the thing that was the last thing you did, yeah? That makes sense? So I know that if I've got 14, what was it? What was the question mark before I added 8? So how do I work that out? Well, I have to do 14 and then do the inverse operation, minus 8. And what do I get? 6. Okay, so I know that that stage it had to have been 6. Yeah? Well, then I've got to work out, well, what was it before I multiplied by 3? So I have to divide it by 3, and I get the answer 2. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So this is a way of putting down, or in your head, this is the process that we need to go through. In reality, what we've been doing is writing it down in a slightly different way, haven't we? We've been saying, if 3x plus 8 is 14, well, what did we write? How did we write it down? So we first off subtract the 8. So we were doing subtract 8 from both sides because we're keeping the equivalent sign. So we've got 3x's therefore must equal 6. And now we're at this stage. And then we say divide by 3 gives me 2. So there's my final answer. There's my solution. Yeah? So can you see how both ways get you there? The flowchart way is the way I've been trying to encourage you to think and say it to yourself. So you get the order of it correct. All right? So let's just have a look at another example then. So if I said to you this one, excuse me, what's the order of the operation? What's the order in which things have happened? So the first thing, we start with x and then we subtract the 1 first, don't we? How do I know it's subtract 1 first and not divide by 5? Nope. Yeah.
Wouldn't it not make sense to divide 1 and 5?
I'm not asking you to do that yet. I'm thinking about what is the order in which things happen to x to get the answer 1. So what's the first thing that we did to x?
Divide by 5. First we have to subtract by 1.
And how do you know that is what I'm asking, Danny. How do I know that it has to be subtract 1 first and not divide by 5 first? Because it's a language, so I've written that down. I can write it such that divide by 5 comes first, and then I subtract 1. But what would that look like? Go on, Mackay. X. Not take away 5, but take away 1. Do you see the difference between the two? So what is it about the two? Why is the top one subtract first and then divide by 5? And why is this one first divide by 5 and then subtract 1? How can I tell from the way it's written that that's the order in which it happens?
Is it minus 1 divided by 5? Is that on its own? Is that why you do it? You have to take. Does that make sense?
Let me just say, so if I give this, let's say that's 24, so they now look the same. Different answers, they will have to be different answers. But what is it about the way it's written that I know the subtract 1 comes first rather than the divide by 5? But in this one I know it's the divide by 5 first, then subtract 1. How can I tell that? Yeah, how do I know BEDMAS? It is BEDMAS, but division does, yeah. Unless there are brackets, right? But there are no brackets. So what is it that replaces the brackets in the first one? The divide. It's the fact that, do you notice how the division sign is underneath the whole thing? Whereas in this one, the division sign is only underneath the x. Does that make sense? So I know, therefore, that the minus 1 is not divided by the 5, so the divide by 5 had to come first. Whereas this one, everything is divided by 5, so I know the subtract 1 had to come first. Now, sometimes you'll see brackets written like that. Alright, and that would make it easy, wouldn't it? Yeah. Brackets first, then. But why are there no brackets? Because we don't need brackets. What is it there that replaces the need for brackets? The longer line. The fact that the line goes under everything. Okay? That is instead of the brackets. I don't need the brackets. You can put brackets in if you like, but you won't see them in the book because we use a long line to represent that. So anyway, with this then, so I've got I minus 1, then divide by 5, and the answer is 1. So how would I solve it? Take the 1, and I know the last thing that happened was divide by 5. So I have to do what to times by 5. So I can do it, think of it in the flowchart way, saying, right, multiply by 5 first, and what was the answer then? 5. So I know it must be 5. Then I have to add the 1 back on, do the inverse, and I get 6. So I know x is 6. Now if I was going to do that the way that we've been doing it, the way we've done it is to say multiply by 5 gives me x minus 1 before I divided by 5 has to equal 5, which is what I've got there. Yeah. Then I add the 1, gives me x equals 6. All right. This one, again, I get the answer 24. But this time, the first thing to undo is the last thing that happened. So I have to undo the minus 1, and I do that by adding it back on, which means the answer would have been 25. So I've put that there. So then I have to undo the divide by 5, which is times by 5, and I get 125. How would I do that normally? So x divided by 5 minus 1 is 24. So the first thing I need to do is add 1. Gives me, what would it be before I subtracted the 1? And then I times by 5. Gives me, before I divide by 5, I would get 125. Yes. I'm carrying on without you. Yes, Michael. Here. Yeah. Because I know x subtract 1 equals 5, so if I add the 1 back on.
But how do you know x is 6? Because it's 5 divided by 5 is 1, and if you 5 plus 1, it would be 6. It's not like 1. It would be the opposite of 1.
Which bit? So, which bit are you looking at? Are you looking at this bit or this bit?
Yeah.
This one? Right, let me rewrite it for you then. Okay? So I know, okay, what we've been told is that x minus 1 then divide by 5 gets me the answer 1, yeah? That's what I've been told. So, what is the answer to just x minus 1? Well, x minus 1 divided by 5 is 1. So I have to get rid of the divide by 5. And how do I get rid of the divide by 5? Multiply by 5. So I'm going to multiply all this by 5. That gets rid of the divide by 5 and leaves me with just the x minus 1 before I divide by 5. Yeah? What must that be equal to? Well, I have to multiply this side by the 5 as well. And I get 1 times 5 is 5. So it makes sense. X minus 1 divided by 5. Well, 5 divided by 5 is 1, yeah? So it must be true. Now I've got to go another step, which is, well, what was x before I subtracted 1? And how do I find that out? I have to add the 1 back on, right? Well, if something minus 1 makes 5, if I add the 1 back on, the answer has to be 1 more as well, doesn't it? So that means that x has to be equal to 6. Yeah? But what's important there, guys, is that we have to consider the order in which things happened in the correct order. Because if I do things in the wrong order, I will get the wrong solution. Just remind me, what's a solution again? Nick? Because I'm glad you all didn't just shout out, it's the answer! Because remember we talked about it's not just the answer, is it?
The value of the variable, which makes the thing.
Good. Remember we talked about it last time. The solution is the value of the variable that makes it true. Is it ever possible that there can be more than one solution?
Yeah.
So what are the options that we talked through yesterday, Friday? There can be one solution, like these. There could be 2 solutions.
None.
There could be no solutions at all if it doesn't, it's just never going to work. Or every possible number could be. Actually, depending on what equations we're working on, we could have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 solutions, or an infinite number of solutions. Okay? Right. So, if you have a look, what I want you to do, starting then on page 155. Now it's going to be full range for you to get yourself ready. So you're going to use this time to be ready to move on and do an assessment on this when we get back. Alright? So page 155, are you writing this down in your notes now? So page 155. Don't start yet, because you might think, we've got page 155, so we've got exercise 8D. Alright? I want you to be happy with any of that. So have a look through and think, what are the ones that I need to practice on? I don't want you to do all of them unless you feel you want to do all of them. Alright? But you need to be happy with any of those. Okay? If you turn over the page to 156 and 157, you'll see where it talks about the flow charts, which is what we've just talked about. But you could do some of those, but then what I want you to then look at is page 158, and you've got exercise 8F, you've got 8, sorry, it's just 8F. Page 158, 159. Again, I want you to be happy with any of those. You see it in the book? All right. Also, that goes on to page 160. Can you have a look at those for me? Questions 5 and 6. So all of that is exercise 8F. We have then also, if you turn to page 162, with exercise 8G, we've done all of those where there's unknowns and things on both sides. You've done all of these using that website. Okay? So that's page 162, 163. Now I need you, however you want to do it, whichever ones you feel you want to practice the most, I need you to be 100% happy with all of those. Alright? So if you feel, actually I've got loads to do, I'm really struggling, you might just have to go, right, I'm going to make some time to get all of it sorted. If you think, actually no, I'm pretty much fine until I get to exercise 8G, you can focus on the 8G stuff. Okay? But I will assume when we come back after Easter that we're ready to be able to do any of those in an assessment. Right? So now is the time, if there are any issues, for you to work on it and have the discussion this week. Okay? So you're not here on Wednesday, so that means you've got today, you've got tomorrow. Okay? I think Thursday. We miss Friday, so you've got Today, tomorrow and Thursday, I'll let you use those lessons, and I've got the homework for you. You can just use all those lessons to do as many of these as you can get done in those times. All right? And be 100% happy and ask for help whenever you need. Is that clear?
What is happening on Wednesday?
You're going to digital citizenship